Well, we ended the last segment by just looking at a number of the many different uses that charcoal is employed in a hospital. And one of those is accidental poisoning or drug overdose. And you never know when little hands and eyes are exploring the house and what they might find and what they might put in their mouth. And if you don't happen to have charcoal in your house, then you're setting yourself up for a tragedy. Hopefully this never will happen, but isn't it more proactive to actually have charcoal, have a remedy there in your house than thinking about what you're going to do in an emergency? Well, it is. And a study was done, well, it's quite a few years now at the Kentucky Poison Control Center, where they wanted to see what the response was if they did a media blitz in the state, encouraging everybody, all families, to have activated charcoal for accidental poisoning in their house, ready at hand should that event happen. And they did this media blitz on radio and TV and the media, papers, and then they followed up 138 cases of home poisoning. 115 children, that's 83% of the treated group, responded by treating the children in the home, right where the poisoning happened. The average treatment time was 38 minutes, as opposed to going to the emergency room, which was almost twice as long, 73 minutes. By the time they gathered everything up, got to the hospital, checked in, checked with the nurse, and waited, it could actually go 73 minutes. And by that time, the charcoal is beginning to move out of the stomach, out of the reach of the charcoal, and the effectiveness decreases for every minute that passes. So the study found that actually if you had charcoal in the home, that was a better option than taking your child to the hospital. You can imagine a little child going to a hospital under excited circumstances. They're somebody they've never met before is trying to mix up something black and put it down their throat. So the better option was to be prepared and practice prevention. Hopefully it will never happen. But also they found out that the amount of dollars that they saved was in the millions, literally in the millions, for treating children at home for accidental poisoning. You can imagine the cost for treating somebody for a few days in a hospital in an ER room, anticipating maybe some dire consequences. Well, you can do this in the home if you're prepared. And it is, I said, as an emergency. You don't go looking for fire extinguishers when your house is on fire. You have a fire extinguisher in your house, you have one in your car, and you have a plan for the fire should it happen. Now, poisons, not just those that you might think come out of a bottle of drugs over the counter or whatever, but this is just a short list of the different chemicals, natural or man-made, that charcoal is known to absorb. The list goes on and on and on. And I have to smile. One of them there is THC. It's supposedly a recreational drug. One day, a young fellow called on the phone, and he said, "Do you sell charcoal?" And I said, "Yes, we do. Why?" He said, "Will charcoal absorb THC?" And I said, "Yes, charcoal will absorb THC." And he said, "Thanks." And he hung up the phone. Apparently he had taken some, and maybe there was a test ahead of him and he didn't want to test positive. In fact, that very thing happened. One day a mother called and said, "Our son has taken some substance, drug substance, and he's going to have a urine test in 30 minutes. Do you think charcoal will help?" And I said, "Well, it's a very short time span, but yes, I think charcoal just might help. And it's not going to hurt to try." And I said, "Have you ever talked to him about something else besides drugs?" Anyway, that was beside the point. And she said, "Well, how much charcoal should he take?" And at this point, I have a kind of a moral dilemma. I'm thinking, maybe this young fellow really needs some time, some quiet time behind some bars to think this through. Should I actually tell him, the mother, what to do? And then I thought, well, I found myself in that situation more than once in my previous life, and God was gracious to me, so I said, "Yes, you make sure you give him lots of charcoal and lots of water." And well, she said, "Well, how much?" And I said, lots. I didn't want her to be stingy on the charcoal. I wanted her to give lots of charcoal. As Kimberly said, you can give too little and it won't really do any good. But it's better to give too much when it comes to a case of poisoning. And in a case of poisoning at emergency room, it can be 2.5 heaping tablespoons of charcoal powder for an infant. And that can be one dose given over in 8 hours. They might give 2 more doses. So you can see in a case of poisoning, they could give a lot of charcoal. And for an adult, it can be 5 tablespoons, 5 heaping tablespoons of charcoal powder, or 50 grams for accidental poisoning. So take lots, and that way you'll be assured that the charcoal will adsorb whatever toxins are passing through your system. Now, yes, charcoal does absorb most drugs. There are some that it does not absorb, and you'll have to apply something else. Obviously, most of us are not pharmacists and chemists, so we should call a poison control center and find out what they suggest. And if you're a long ways from the hospital, start giving charcoal as you head to the hospital, and hopefully by the time you get there, you won't need it anymore. Now here's a short list of activated charcoal and toxic metals that it absorbs. People ask, will it absorb heavy metals? Some yes, and some no. Here's a good example where charcoal doesn't work for aluminum, beryllium, manganese, and some others. But it does work for these heavy metals such as arsenic. They're used in gold and copper, tin, silver, and even mercury. Mercury is a powerful toxin, and it will absorb mercury if the charcoal is in the body long enough. Typically in our business, we don't recommend activated charcoal for neutralizing mercury. We would recommend bone charcoal. But that is because in industrial applications, sometimes there's a very short time of contact with the filter media, in this case bone char, and it will actually absorb the mercury well. Activated charcoal does not work that well on a short exposure. So if you ingest it, it stays in your stomach longer, there's a better chance it will absorb these heavy metals. And you'll notice down here radioactive metals as well. Coconut activated charcoal is the antidote of choice for radioactive metals. Interesting phenomena, a bit of chemistry there and physics, but we can't go into right here. Smoking teeth, this is something put out by the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology. They show mercury vapors coming off a 25-year-old silver filling dipped in water. Exposed to hot water, that's 1,000 times more than the EPA limits, and it can last for up to an hour and a half. And this is from your amalgam, that is your mercury fillings in your mouth, putting off these vapors, and those vapors can be very toxic. This is showing up on a fluorescent screen. We don't have time to go into charcoal for autism. It's a long discussion point, but autistic children sometimes have gut issues that are not well defined, and the parents don't really understand what's going on. But we've had parents contact us and tell us that with their autistic children, when they give charcoal, it seems to regulate their bowels, and they don't manifest the symptoms as aggressively or strongly as without the charcoal. So it's, again, worth a try. If it doesn't help, it's not going to add to the problem. Here's a dialysis machine. The blood comes out of the arm, goes into the dialysis unit, and one of the filters that the water passes through is a charcoal filter to clean out any contaminants in the municipal water that's feeding this machine. So there could be drugs in that water in small amounts. There could be any number of pollutants in that water. Charcoal is used to clean that water before it's used to then clean the blood. Now this is a kidney dialysis machine, but Loma Linda University Hospital developed a liver dialysis machine, which actually uses a bed of granular charcoal, and the blood is filtered through this charcoal to remove toxins. Now, cholesterol and triglycerides have been for a long time, have been a concern in their effects on cardiovascular disease, whether it's low-density lipoproteins or high-density lipoproteins. and cholesterol and triglycerides. This is a study back in 1986, but these studies actually go back to the early 1900s when people were given charcoal and to see if it would have any impact on total cholesterol in their blood. And lo and behold, sure enough, in this one study reported in the Lancet Journal, 2 tablespoons of charcoal powder 2 times a day for 4 weeks. Look what it did. It lowered the total cholesterol by 25%. And more importantly, the low-density lipoproteins came down 41%. And then when you look at the triglycerides, they came down a whopping over 76%. So how does it work? Well, there's a little bit of mystery there, a little bit of chemistry that scientists don't fully understand, but somehow it's interrupting the absorption of these lipids into the bloodstream, which then can affect a person's health. David O'Cooney had a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Wyoming, and he said in his large book on charcoal, activated charcoal, medicinal charcoal, he said the reader should be convinced that ever new uses for the remarkable substance known as activated charcoal will continue to evolve. And as we've been in this business now for, well, going on 10 years or more, we have seen that his prophecy come true. A week does not go by that somebody doesn't contact us. Some research work going on, R&D work to see if charcoal will work effectively in this particular application. What about the future? Well, it's a very interesting future for activated charcoal. As I mentioned, it's going to Mars. It's already on the International Space Station, and it has a humble origin, but now they're exploring a new kind of carbon called a Buckminster fullerene, called a C60 molecule, and it's shaped just like a soccer ball. It has 5 and 6 alternating carbon rings, and it looks a lot like a geodesic dome. But these super carbon molecules have a super capacity to absorb toxins, and you can't make them in your kitchen sink, and you can't make them like you make activated charcoal. At this point, they're very expensive to make. They're hard to find, very hard to find and buy. Well, what's that got to do with plain charcoal that you would make out in a fire pit? Well, lo and behold, researchers from one of the universities of technology in Osaka, or excuse me, in, I guess it was Osaka, they found fragments of these super molecules, these C60 molecules in the common charcoal that you would get from a fire pit. Somehow God has decided that we'll put some of these little tidbits of super molecules, C60, into the regular charcoal, and let's see what it will do. A few years ago, the University of Paris did some experiments on C60 to see what the effects would be on how it might absorb drugs. And they used these laboratory rats, these old laboratory rats, and lo and behold, they were able to extend the lifespan of the laboratory rats by over 90% by using these C60 molecules. Well, charcoal, regular charcoal, is not C60, but again, it has fragments of these C60 molecules, and they have done other tests to show that even activated charcoal can extend the lifespan of laboratory rats by up to 34%. Well, we are faced in our world with a lot of calamities. It seems like they come closer to home every time. And one of these days we think, well, it might happen to us. And if you're depending on outside resources in a calamity, you're probably going to be very disappointed. If you remember the hurricane, what was it, the hurricane in Louisiana? Katrina, thank you. Everything was shut down. The highways were shut down. There was bad water, bad sanitation, the power outages. People couldn't get out of town. They were locked into town, into the city. And disease started to spread. There was lack of medical equipment. Medicines began to spoil because there was lack of refrigeration. But here, lo and behold, if somebody had, even if they had known, they could have gone out and they could have built a fire. somewhere, collected wood, built a fire, and made charcoal. That charcoal could have been used to filter swamp water. You know, where we live out in Nebraska, when the U.S. Cavalry was out there, they would come into an area and they would build a crib. And in this crib, they would have rocks, sand, and just regular charcoal that they would make from their fireplace. And they would bring the water in through the rocks and up through and down through the sand. And then it would filter through this regular charcoal and out, and they had drinking water. It would clean the water that quickly. Now, why couldn't we do that in a calamity? With charcoal, you also have something for infection. We've showed you that it can be used as a bandage material for infections. On and on are the uses that this simple remedy can be used for. Now here's an interesting thing, more contemporary, and that is Fukushima in Japan. After the tsunami hit, some of the ramifications of that was the nuclear power plant actually got damaged, and some of the reactors got too hot, and there were explosions. Nobody told us at the time in the media that each one of these reactors has a crib of activated charcoal. Each one of those reactors takes the contaminated air, pushes it through these coconut activated charcoal filters before that contaminated air goes up into the atmosphere and contaminates that air. Every one of these reactors had coconut activated charcoal. Well, guess what happened after this meltdown, this nuclear fallout? The Japanese government began to buy up activated charcoal, not just any kind, but coconut activated charcoal all around Asia. And the only reason we knew about that is because of our business. And we saw prices going up and availability was going down. The time frame for getting in shipments was getting longer and longer. And I finally asked, what's happening? He says, well, production's not down. It's actually up, but all this charcoal is going to Japan to be used to clean up the nuclear contamination. Did you ever hear that on the media? I surely didn't. People were buying iodine or potassium iodine tablets or potassium iodine capsules or tablets at the stores for $100 in hopes that these would neutralize the iodine if they breathed it in or drank it, and they wouldn't get radioactive poisoning. When right at hand, there was all kinds of outlets selling charcoal that they could have used, and it is the antidote of choice. There's a statement I really appreciate that I have in my book on charcoal remedies. It was actually said by a former medical examiner for the state of Georgia, Dr. Agatha Thrash. She said, charcoal has amazing healing properties. In fact, if I were stranded on a desert island and could take only one thing along to protect me from disease, infection, and injury and pain, I would choose charcoal. Now here is a woman who was a professional, she was a pathologist, she ran a health institute, she did autopsies, she knew disease and the cause of disease and the results of disease and poisoning. And with all the opportunity to pick any drug that she wanted, what would she choose? She would have chosen charcoal if she was stranded on a desert island. Well, I actually lived on a desert island for 6 months, and I can tell you that I would not take charcoal if that was my only choice. You know what I would choose? I would choose waterproof matches. Now, with waterproof matches, I can build my own fire, I can make my own charcoal, I can cook my fish, I can boil my water, and I can send smoke signals up into the sky when the plane comes looking to find me. The point is, charcoal is wherever you can find it. If you can start a fire, you can make your own. You don't have to take it with you in an emergency. Well, charcoal can be made from a number of different raw sources, from peat, from coal, from hardwood, from coconut, from bamboo, from pecan shells. Anything that's of vegetable origin can be converted into charcoal. And the process is by heating it up. You heat it up to a very high temperature, and as it's heating up, the vapors come off, then the volatile chemicals come off, and you're left at the end of this experiment with raw charcoal, basically pure carbon. You blow the dust off, and then you can proceed to grind it up. Or if you don't grind it up, you can actually chew it. Just put that piece of charcoal in your mouth and start chewing it, and it will work very quickly. Just chew it well and swallow it. Here's a picture showing a giant kiln where activated charcoal is manufactured. The starting material goes at one end, and this giant tube rotates slowly. It can be up to 20 feet in diameter, and slowly the raw charcoal moves through this giant tube. It gets very hot, and as it gets hotter and hotter, the gases are cooked off, and the inside of the particle is eroded, and it gets more and more internal structure. So if you can imagine a sponge, a block of wood that is solid, and you make it into a sponge, the outside dimension really doesn't change at all. It's the internal part of the sponge that erodes away, and you have this internal structure. And it can be so large that 1 teaspoon of activated charcoal, if you could somehow unfold all that surface area, would amount to the size of a soccer field. And it's that huge surface area that attracts chemicals, poisons to its surface, and holds them and will not let them go. So when you take charcoal by your mouth, it starts here and it goes all the way to the other end, and as it's traveling along, it's mopping up poisons, holding them to it, and won't let those poisons go until they're all eliminated from the body. What a wonderful idea, what a wonderful thing that God has provided for us for any number of emergency situations. Now here's an example of poisoning, food poisoning. It is treated in hospitals sometimes with charcoal, but food poisoning, you can be anywhere and get it. You can, it's one of the largest causes of death in the world. I've mentioned in Africa, diarrhea, cholera, and so forth. What are you going to do? What are you going to use? Well, there is no remedy that works as well for vomiting and diarrhea as charcoal. Your body is telling you that there's something it does not like in your stomach, and so you will want to vomit it out. Or you have something in your bowels that your bowels do not like, it's irritating, and your body is saying, get rid of that poison, and you have diarrhea. But after a while, you can run out of fluids. It can go too long and too far. And so by taking charcoal, you will neutralize those endotoxins from whatever it's coming from that are producing these reactions of nausea and vomiting and diarrhea. And sometimes, almost miraculously, within a half an hour, you can stop severe diarrhea or vomiting. And if it doesn't work internally, then apply it as a charcoal poultice. And here's an example of some diseases that have common symptoms of diarrhea and vomiting. You have the turista, which is traveler's diarrhea when you go to foreign country, or cholera, HIV/AIDS, Spanish influenza, the bird flu, and so forth. Many different diseases have these common symptoms of diarrhea and vomiting, and people suffer needlessly when they could take charcoal. It could eliminate the diarrhea and vomiting, and then the body has more energy to be able to do the things that the charcoal can't help with. So it should be a primary line of treatment for any of these bowel symptoms that can come from any number of different sources. Now this is a colobus monkey, and this is a certain group of monkeys that live in Africa. They have cousin monkeys, but this particular tribe of monkeys has a taste for charcoal, not activated charcoal because there isn't any there. But they will come down out of the trees and they will steal the charcoal that the people are selling on the side of the road for people to cook with. Well, why do they come down and why do they steal this charcoal? Well, this colobus monkey has an appetite for mango leaves and almond leaves, which are very high in protein. This high protein diet from these leaves gives the infants a more robust structure. They're healthier and they're stronger than their cousin monkeys. But the problem is that these mango leaves and these almond leaves also have toxins in them that give these monkeys diarrhea. Now, where did these monkeys learn the fact that if they could go over and eat that charcoal, that it would take care of these poisons that were triggering this diarrhea? I don't know. But they're stealing the charcoal nevertheless, and they're reaping the benefits. What a shame that the man who's selling the charcoal doesn't know that these dumb animals, well, I guess they're not so dumb, have found out that charcoal is a great aid for vomiting and especially for diarrhea. Well, you know, you don't have to go to Africa, and you don't have to be a monkey to eat something to give you an upset stomach. You can go to a restaurant, you can go to a church potluck, you can have something at your neighbor's house, and it's not bad, nobody else reacts to it, but you do. It gives you an upset stomach, and so there you are all night tossing and turning. You're not sick enough to go to the ER, but you still can't sleep. What a shame that if you had charcoal in your house, you could go over, get up, go over to the sink, as we demonstrated, pour out some water, mix in some charcoal. I prefer to actually put it in a lidded jar. So I'll put some water in the jar, put the charcoal in the water, put the cap back on, shake it till it's thoroughly mixed, and open it up, and then I pour it out into a glass and drink it that way. What a shame that people that they suffer on and on like this, when if they had the remedy in the house, they could easily put the fire out and go back to sleep. Travelers the same way, whether it's bad water, bad food, bad air, infection, cholera, dysentery, anthrax, insect bites, charcoal is a wonderful remedy. Well, we don't have time in this program to go through all of our applications. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of testimonies that people have sent to us over the years, and we've posted them on our website called charcoalremedies.com. Again, the name of the book, and I encourage you to go there, charcoalremedies.com. There's many pages. There's hundreds of different stories, newest research, all these things that you can look at yourself at your own leisure and catch up on the news. We also have a blog called charcoaltimes.com, and you can go there and get more information as well. Well, thank you very much for joining us for this segment on charcoal, medicinal charcoal in the 21st century. And our next program coming up is some hydrotherapy, herbs, and maybe a light bulb treatment for a sinus infection. Join us, won't you?